Hello, I'm Riley McManus, and welcome to this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. There's a huge development regarding Anishinaabe Nation. The NAN chiefs have decided to remove Derek Fox as Grand Chief. Fox was suspended in late February due to allegations he violated the NAN Executive Council Code of Conduct. The suspension was confirmed by NAN chiefs during an emergency meeting on March 9th, and an independent third-party investigation was ordered. After reviewing the investigators' report, the Chiefs Assembly decided late yesterday afternoon to remove Fox from his position of Grand Chief, a post he was elected to in 2021. A by-election will be called within 30 days. NAN officials say given the sensitive nature of yesterday's in-camera deliberations, no further comment will be made at this time. The month-long inquest into the death of Indigenous artist Moses Beaver wrapped up in Thunder Bay on Friday. The 56-year-old man had been suffering from a mental health crisis in his remote community in 2017 and died a month later after hanging himself in his Thunder Bay jail cell. The inquest jury signed off on 63 recommendations to prevent similar deaths from happening in the future. Mike Lang reports.
The jury's 63 recommendations were made to help improve mental health care for remote First Nations. The Ministry of Health was urged to fund Orange Air ambulances to expand their mental health transport team programs so that they can provide 24/7 emergency support for mental health patients in remote communities. In Beaver's case, bad weather and a lack of available aircraft delayed his transportation to larger crisis centers in Sioux Lookout or Thunder Bay. Therefore, the recommendations also suggest for mobile mental health and addictions clinics to be created in remote territories to prevent mental health crises from getting worse as it did for Beaver.
The thoughtfulness and the direction of those recommendations, I think, really speaks to the impact that Moses had on everyone around him, and certainly it had an impact on the jury, and they showed us that through the very carefully drafted recommendations that they provided to the parties.
One of the lawyers working with coroner in this inquest, Julian Roy, says the jury's recommendations will help save lives.
We're very proud of the work that they did. They were very attentive to the evidence. They worked very hard in their deliberations, and they've come up with a comprehensive set of recommendations that we really are hopeful will help to save lives both in northern communities and in Ontario's correctional facilities.
The recommendations also state that all frontline staff and district jail staff should receive more extensive training and cultural awareness about remote reserves. Casper says the awareness raised from Beaver's case could also encourage those who are on the verge of crisis to seek some of the help they need from within their community.
We've also seen the beauty of Indigenous community, Indigenous family, where they fill that gap and they do the advocacy. Now we just need to make sure that on the other end of family and community, we have those working in the systems that are ready to receive and to listen.
As the recommendations are applied across all levels, Casper adds that the next step is to determine how to overcome the barriers of their implementation. Mike Lang, TBT News.
A state of emergency has been declared in Atikokan following the collapse of a large culvert on Tuesday. Fortunately, no one was hurt. The incident left a gaping hole in a busy roadway which crosses the Atikokan River, and it also took out a section of water line, leaving the town under a boil water advisory. Lee Noonan has more.
No injuries have been reported in the dramatic collapse along Mercury Avenue where it crosses over the Atikokan River. Mayor Rob Ferguson says it could have been much worse.
It was rather sudden, but people did see it coming apparently and stopped traffic. And then within a few minutes, it let go and went.
Ferguson credits the quick actions of local emergency response with keeping everyone safe. He says there's steady traffic on the collapsed road, but that thankfully police were called and the road closed before it caved in.
Everybody's safe. There's no injuries. There is no threat to life or anything in Atikokan. So that's the main thing. We always worry about the safety of our residents.
The town's water system was temporarily disrupted and a boil water advisory put into effect as the incident severed a 12-inch water line. Ferguson praises local public works for their response.
The reaction was really quick. They isolated that line and got water rising in the clear wells, and we were able to to put the water back on in the town within an hour. We're under a boil water advisory because we did lose our levels in our clear well, and we're expecting that to be a few days before we can get the tests for all clear.
Ferguson says the culvert was already showing signs of fatigue and was scheduled for replacement this summer, but that it's too early to speculate on what caused the sudden collapse. The original time estimate for the project was 1 month, and the mayor expects that timeline will now be extended, forcing drivers to take alternate routes for the time being. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
A murder trial was held in Thunder Bay this week regarding a tragic incident in Manitouwadge 2 years ago. The accused is charged with second-degree murder in the stabbing death of his younger brother. 40-year-old Jesse Allen was arrested in January of 2021. The victim, 18-year-old Wayne Allen, was stabbed twice in the chest at a family home in Manitouwadge. Lawyers for both sides say there is no disputing that Jesse Allen stabbed his brother. However, Allen's lawyer is asking the jury to consider the lesser charge of manslaughter, arguing that his client did not intend to kill his brother. Throughout the trial this week, the court heard from the father of the two brothers and another witness who was there when it happened, along with OPP and paramedics who attended the scene. The jury is expected to deliver its verdict next week. Premier Doug Ford responded to questions in Southern Ontario this week about his plans to develop the Ring of Fire. The Neskantaga First Nation has vowed to do whatever it takes to block the construction of a road over the Attawapaskat River, which runs through the community and their traditional lands. Ford says he doesn't want to see conflict, but he remains committed to supporting the Martin Falls and Webekwe Nations access road into the remote region.
You know something, we're building that Ring of Fire sure as I'm talking to you. It's going to benefit First Nations community. Webekwe, as you said, and Martin Falls is leading the environmental assessment up in that area. We put $1 billion towards the roads, but this isn't just going to bring opportunity and employment to First Nations community. It's going to bring proper health care to the community. It's going to bring fresh food to the community. These communities are flying communities, and they're struggling. And you know, we're going to work with the First Nations community. We'll always be collaborative. And I think your numbers are a little wrong. It's not 7 that are against it. We have a few, and I think one's 300 kilometers away. But we're going to work with them anyways.
Over in Beardmore, the EMS base has closed. We'll be back after the break with more on the program that's replacing it. The ambulance base in Beardmore shut its doors on Tuesday. The closure was first announced last June when Thunder Bay City Council approved the Superior North EMS Master Plan. Beardmore and the surrounding area will now be served by a hybrid first response and community paramedicine program.
Yeah, I can understand how there might be a lot of apprehension about an EMS base closing. But I truly believe that with the service that EMS can provide and through CP, that it'll actually enhance healthcare in the community by really leveraging the primary care, home and community care services, having our paramedics more active in the community instead of waiting in a base for that 911 call to happen.
The paramedics based out of the Beardmore Health Center will still respond to emergency medical calls and provide life-saving care. However, their vehicles cannot transport patients. For that, an ambulance would be called from Geraldton or Nipigon. But the staff all have the same certifications and tools, as well as additional training, particularly in care of chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart, and lung conditions.
It's a complete switch to what we normally do from reactive medicine to proactive healthcare. So the paramedics will do a lot of health promotion, a lot of health surveillance. They'll try to catch people when they're struggling with their health, when they need to seek care. And the idea is instead of calling 911 and going into a hospital where they might be at risk, we provide care in the home.
For now, there's one paramedic in the community, working Monday to Friday. The plan is to deploy a second community paramedic and expand service to 7 days a week. Anyone living between Jellicoe and Rocky Bay can talk to their primary care provider about accessing the new community paramedicine services. The Nipigon District Memorial Hospital is facing a shortage of nurses, putting a strain on both staff and the bottom line. They're pinning their hopes on an innovative new program through Confederation College, but that program is no sure thing. Lee Noonan has more.
When it comes to the nursing shortage at the Nipigon District Memorial Hospital, nurse manager Cynthia Weatherspoon doesn't mince words.
We're in desperate need.
Weatherspoon says the small rural hospital requires at least 6 or 7 full-time nurses. For now, existing staff are putting in overtime and management has sometimes had to roll up their sleeves and fill in.
I have actually had to work on the floor. Our CNE has had to actually work on the floor. Currently, I'm actually running the telehealth unit because we actually don't have a nurse to run that unit.
The shortage also means the hospital has to hire temp nurses through private agencies, something CEO Kathy Eady says has made it impossible to balance the books. Not only is salary costing them 2 to 4 times as much for an agency nurse, but the hospital sometimes incurs other expenses like housing.
I mean, there's not much we can do because we need agency nurses. One of the things is recruiting local and trying to, have our staff 100% local versus having to use agency.
Of course, that raises the question of where to find local nurses. Edie is hoping that Confederation College has the answer. Their practical nursing program offers on-site training, allowing students to stay home and learn at the hospital.
I come from Chapleau. If they would have offered nursing in Chapleau, I would have stayed in Chapleau. And I'd probably still be in Chapleau, right? So what a recruitment thing if we can get it.
The issue is that to run the 2-year diploma program in Nipigon, there need to be at least 6 local applicants. Otherwise, students would be placed in a different North Shore hospital. But Edie is hopeful that the program will attract local men and women who might not otherwise have studied nursing.
It used to be you'd move your whole family into Thunder Bay and at great cost and a lot of change. Now you can have that education here in Nipigon. I think it's a great opportunity for someone, and there's funding from the government for your training. Life has never been this good.
The hospital is very optimistic that if they can get the program up and running here, it'll make a big difference to their staffing challenges. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Is raising concerns about doctor shortages in the north. Saul Mamakwa questioned Health Minister Sylvia Jones at Queen's Park this week about remote First Nations that rarely have a doctor on site, leaving nurses stations with only nurses to deal with serious health emergencies.
Federal nurses have to reach out to on-call doctors by phone to provide a diagnosis. That's normal. in the north. The doctor shortage leads to unnecessary suffering. Speaker, it leads to unnecessary deaths of patients in the far northern Ontario. I ask, how is this government going to immediately help the people of northern Ontario, the suffering because of the doctor shortage?
Since 2018, Speaker, we have added an additional 1,800 physicians in the province of Ontario. We have put in place programs specifically for Northern Ontario to match emergency department with peer-to-peer ED doctors to make sure that they have access to peers who are there for them to be able to work through issues and problems as they appear before their emergency departments.
Local MPP Lise Bourgeois was another of the many NDP members criticizing the Ford government at Queen's Park on Wednesday over doctor shortages in the province. Bourgeois directed her question to Health Minister Sylvia Jones.
The region of Thunder Bay has at least 45,000 people without access to primary care. Greenstone is losing 2 doctors at the end of the month, and seniors are being left without access to any care whatsoever. There are solutions. Further increase enrollment and create a learn and stay program for doctors at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. Establish more nurse practitioner-led clinics.
Northern Ontario School of Medicine, 20 additional residency spots were just announced last week. There is no one in this chamber that doesn't understand and appreciate, with a growing and aging population, we need to do better. What I will say to the NDP and the Liberals is, where would we have been if they hadn't cut those 50 residency spots? We would have had 250 additional practitioners in the province today.
Coming up after the break, big news for Pride in the town of Marathon. For the first time, the town of Marathon will be holding a Pride Parade this June. Marathon's fledgling Pride group is organizing the event. This small group of local LGBTQS advocates and allies have only met twice, but holding a parade was their first priority. Marathon Pride co-founder Ray Taylor says that as a young person, it felt scary to be out in town and found that he needed to move away to find a sense of community. The idea to hold a Pride parade came as they realized there are still queer and trans youth in town who might feel that same isolation.
To know now that there's options to celebrate, even in these small towns, and that people who are queer and non-binary, transgender, people of the LGBT community, the fact that you're not alone and you're not isolated. There are other people just like you who are in the community, and we're all getting together to celebrate together. I think that's really, really important.
The only parade I can think of in town is we do a Christmas parade, and we've got like floats and people in cars. So I guess what I'm imagining is a bunch of people in their cars and their trucks with their nice rainbow flags, maybe decorated, decked out, and we're like maybe with their face paint on, their pride outfits on, sort of just going around cheering, maybe music, I don't know. Just an exciting parade through town where people get to see this like celebration of queerness.
Marathon has held a Pride flag raising for the past several years, and the Pride Committee members say they've gotten overwhelming support from Town Hall and the community at large. The parade will take place on June 25th, followed. Anyone interested in getting involved are encouraged to join the Marathon Pride Facebook group. Marathon Town Council voted this week to approve a new 4-year strategic plan. The plan, which includes a number of major development projects, is intended to guide Council's work over the course of the current term. One of the big ticket items in the 35-point plan is the development of a new active living centre in the town. Council is aiming to have the project designed and costed before the next election. They're also planning a variety of recreational and beautification projects along the waterfront and in town. Mayor Rick Dumas says these and other quality of life initiatives are top priority for Council.
Whether it's the outdoors, trails, recreational activities, active living center, just rules and regulations that we all want to live in a quiet, happy place. It's about quality of life. So, I personally love going to Toronto, but at 3 days, I want to get out of Toronto because I want to come back to my hometown and enjoy my quality of life. My quality of life is a tranquility and peace and quiet that I have here, but yet I have all the amenities that I have and want to continue to enhance those amenities for all of our residents as well as the children and grandchildren that are coming forward.
The rest of the plan includes provisions for infrastructure and environment, economic development, fiscal responsibility, leadership, and collaboration. Meanwhile, the town is looking to hire a new fire chief. They've received a helping hand from Manitouwadge. The neighboring town has lent their fire chief to fill in for Marathon until the role has been filled. He'll be overseeing the fire services in both communities. The province has committed to funding for the operation of an MRI scanner at the Menawenyan Health Centre in Sioux Lookout. But now the hospital needs to come up with about $7 million to actually buy and install the machine. Menawenyan serves roughly 30,000 residents across the area, bigger than Germany. Right now, patients needing an MRI have to travel hundreds of kilometers to Thunder Bay or Winnipeg. Ontario Health Northwest has committed to funding the operation of an MRI at the Menawenyan, but they don't fund capital expenses, leaving the local community to fundraise the estimated $7 million. Sioux Lookout Mayor Doug Lawrence says having an MRI in the hospital will mean better health equity for the region, particularly the First Nations to the north.
They just don't have enough room in Sioux Lookout. So it was a pretty easy decision for council. Serving the First Nations or First Nations people forms 70% or more of the economic activity in Sioux Lookout. Slifton is a big part of that. They're actually the largest employer in the municipality.
According to Lawrence, travel out of the Sioux Lookout area for MRIs alone costs an estimated $1.5 million a year in northern travel grants and non-insured health benefits. Since its incorporation in 1994, the Sioux Lookout Menawenyan Health Centre Foundation has raised over $5 million. They're now gearing up for a fundraising campaign that could more than double that number. The latest flood evacuation in Saskatchewan has prompted debate at Queen's Park about when the First Nation will finally be moved to higher ground. Around 300 evacuees are now in Thunder Bay, with another 400 or so in Timmins. The MPP for the James Bay region questioned Indigenous Services Minister Greg Rickford about the situation this week.
Once again, due to flooding, the community of Saskatchewan had to be evacuated to multiple communities across Northern Ontario. Families with children are bound to live in the hotel rooms with recurring issues, the spring flooding. 5 years ago, the federal and provincial government with Saskatchewan signed an agreement to move the community to a safer location. My question, Premier, what has your government done in those 5 years to move Saskatchewan to their new location?
There is no question that there is a need for us to move on that location. Us involves the community itself and some neighboring communities. The federal government, the provincial government remain committed to that process and continue to work with not just Saskatchewan, but Albany First Nation to ensure that they actually want to do this, and we can proceed with a couple of important processes to make that move. Our door remains open, and we'd like to facilitate that process. It shouldn't take this long.
Nipissing OPP are expressing concern about some highway drivers in that region last weekend. One passenger vehicle was caught doing 151 km/h in a 90K zone, and 2 other drivers were charged with having no license or a suspended license. They also stopped a transport that was missing one of its wheels. The Nipissing detachment received a traffic complaint at around 10:30 Sunday morning. Officers managed to locate the transport and initiated a traffic stop. As a result, the 29-year-old driver from Caledon was charged with driving a commercial motor vehicle with a part detached and driving with a major defect. Nipissing OPP also charged a different transport driver with 10 offenses, including doing 128 km/h and not having a speed limiter. And that wraps up this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. We hope to see you again next week.